Hello and welcome to yet another tutorial from Way Studios, and this is Ola. My name is Olabi Ako, and in this tutorial this is a continuation basically, and here we're going to work on lighting our scene and doing some renders, and also the lighting is going to be in two different types, day lighting and a nighttime lighting, and some few tricks to achieving a good night lighting, and it makes it look good. And of course what I've done here is I've worked on a couple of things. I applied a texture to the floor, to the ground, and which you can see it's this texture I've created myself, and I actually did created this myself, and I think I'm good with it. I had it saved and I have it right here, and I apply it all the time. I think I love the floor. It's reflective floor and it has a very good map for the reflections and all that. Okay, and what I've done as well is I've done a different type of roof. I purposely have this put here because I want to show you a very beautiful plugin which I got from ScriptSpot. It's free to use and you can actually do a lot of things, not just roof with it, but you can do a very good and lovely roof corrugation with this, and which I got from ScriptSpot, and which is right here. It's free. It's a site you can just visit. A whole loads of Max plugins and scripts, and here it's Avid Studio Tools 8 tiles, and it has a very good tile plugin. It's a script you run and apply the marks, and you can as well you can go to the site and see the tutorial. The main site is here, right here, and you can see the tutorials. Very simple, easy to follow tutorials you can get, and shows you how to walk through the process of creating roofs and other stuffs like walls, like floors and all that. And you can see the script. They have version 1 to 1.4, and you can visit that site and see a lot. I'm not going to put too much time out on showing you how to work this, because there's already a tutorial on this, and you can as well just come visit avidstudio.com and get to see what they work with. Okay, and one other thing and we'll look at is what I'm going to use for my lighting, my initial lighting for the scene, which I'm going to be working with HDRI images on my V-Ray light. And I have this HDRI image here, right here, and you can see this slightly, and let's do a rotate and see what it's actually. Anyone that doesn't know what an HDRI means, it's like a capture of with different exposure of an environment, and actually it stores lighting and image, high dynamic range imaging, which stores different exposures, different level of exposures in a particular image. So you can actually adjust the exposure so you can achieve whatever you want, and it does light the scene well, very much well. And in fact it simulates a sun location as well, because you can see the very bright area is where the sun comes from. And HDRI images are very wonderful to work with, and you can as well get some free HDRI images from Viz People. They have a couple of free tools, free stuff, and you can see they have free 3D models and free background images for your post works, and as well you can as well use them inside of Max, and you have some models. Then of course what we're talking about here, the HDRI map. Just sign up to download the HDRI image and a couple of other things you can as well see, but just for this particular tutorial you'd need HDRI images, and you can as well just get them from Viz People. So very high quality HDRI images, and 10 in number, different scenes. And you can have, I think there's always as well a night shot scene there, which will still be working on night shots afterwards, and so it will be good for you to just get HDRI images from here. Alright, and what we do now is, the first thing we are going to do is normally we should set up a camera, but yet we don't have a camera. Okay, first, and we would try to set up a camera in our scene, and we'll look for a reasonable enough angle, an angle that shows something good enough. Okay, I think this angle is good enough, and from here, how I do create my camera, once I get a very good angle, I love to work on, and most times it's always a human eye that is most interesting to get, because that is what gives you a very good presentation of the building, the best presentation of the building actually. So I go to my camera and I pick my V-Ray camera. Why I choose my V-Ray camera is because it actually does adjust and functions like the real live camera. You can adjust a couple of settings, and we'll see while we work on that. And so I pick my camera, I click and drag in the scene, I let it go, then I press my Ctrl C to set the view to that camera, then I press C one more time to pick that camera view and adjust it to that left. Then I come back to my modify, then I have my camera setting, which I can actually now adjust however I want the focal length. Most times I always choose a focal length of 30 to give a good camera angle. Then I zoom in a little bit, and if I see I need a little bit of distortion with vertical shift, I can just adjust that right there. I think that is good, which gives a 0.006. I think you should just do that dynamically and see what goes good for you. Alright, one other thing is I select my camera by clicking this, and I select my camera, then come to my move window, and I try to put my camera exactly at the human eye level. And the human eye level is always ranging between let's say it's right about the height of an average man, which is 1,750, or you can between 1,6 and 1,750, and I most times use 1,750. Then if I have to, I can just do a little bit of adjustments and all that, and which this is quite interesting. This is the view mostly that will be seen whenever you are on the real life, and this is what you see, except you want other views as requested by your client and all that. So, and this is what I work with. Okay, so I think I'm good with my camera reasonably. Let's just go ahead from here. You could have other camera angles, and you could, depending on what you want to achieve, depending on the feel and the mood you want to create basically. Okay, one other thing I do, I can get rid of this. One other thing I do, I can get back to my perspective view, is put my light in my scene. That is the main light in the scene, which is now a V-Ray light. I come to my lights, then on the drop down I get my V-Ray lights, and I pick the regular V-Ray light. Most people don't know this, that you have various other light types in the V-Ray light, and so I think this is a good time for you to know, and a lot of other people do know. And so I can come to my dome light. Basically most people just know it to be the V-Ray plane, and you can have the dome, you can have the sphere for like a bulb, you can have the mesh for a particular shape, which you can actually conform to a particular shape of a particular object you have, and let it generate and let it act as a light and generate light itself. Okay, so what I do is I use my V-Ray dome, which acts as the engulfing sky, with the engulfing sky basically giving light from all direction. That is how the real world light gets, the sky gives when we're talking of the real world light. So what you just do this, when you have your dome, you just place it anywhere in the scene. It doesn't really matter where you place it, as long as it's turned on, it is active. So and you can right click to exit creation again. Then once you have it there, it's a little bit dark, so you use your Control L to toggle to the max default lighting style, because that is actually trying to simulate the light in with the V-Ray dome. So pressing a Control L just turns it back to the default max viewport lighting, and so you can see your viewport quite well. And one other thing we are going to now do is, this is where we're going to use our V-Ray HDRI, our HDRI images. And so we have different options you can actually work with here, but most times you want everything to be left as is. But at times I'll show you how you could have some at times you could want this to be invisible or visible, depending on how you're choosing to light your scene. You could, if it's invisible, then you see whatever map you apply in your texture for the HDRI light. So let's go back to our material editor. Then what we do now is we drag, and with the V-Ray HDRI we have created using this is how I create mine. I from an empty slot and an empty material slot, get material, and I come here to use my standard, and I go to I come to maps, and then V-Ray, then you can see the standards here. Then I come to my V-Ray HDRI, which is right here, and I double click that and it dumps it into my empty slot, and you see a blank thing. Then right there you can now just browse to the location of your HDRI map right here, so which gives me this. Okay, and now I have, and the good thing about the V-Ray is you can actually load any type. You can actually load an EXR, which is much higher, and you can load the regular HDRI, and you can load the regular HDRI maps and all that. So I have my HDRI map loaded up here. Then to apply this here, what I just do is I just click and drag and drop it inside that texture. And don't forget, you should make this instance, because if you make a copy, you'd have to edit that. You have to drag this back in here and in a new stop, and so I make it instant, so I can, once I adjust this, it automatically reflects right here, and I don't have to go back and try to figure what I want to do. So right here it's applied. And one other thing you shouldn't forget is, by default you get a multiplier of 30, which is way too high for your scene, except you just have to start adjusting your camera setting, which might be a little bit too awkward. And so what I'd advise initially, just put it on the multiplier of 1. It might be less upon what you preview or render to be, and it might be more. Okay, and so I think at this we should do a preview render and see what our scene looks like. And because I want to take this step by step and make you see the couple of changes and the differences you have in various settings. Okay, so let's take a look at our render setup. By default, what I do is I have my default setting with the V-Ray setting. I only change a couple of things, and which I have my adaptive DMC and my Catmull, because this is a filtering that makes the render sharp. It gives a very sharp render, and I leave my environment turned off, and because I already have the V-Ray DOM acting as an environment which generates a global illumination to the scene. And my color mapping, at times I use the exponential. The different scenes I use different but right now I'm using my Reinhardt, which I've set the multiplier of 1, and I'm using a gamma of 1.8. By default, most people use a gamma of 2.2, but depending on what you want to achieve, at times to achieve what you want, you don't have to try to be precise at settings. It's what it comes out as that matters, basically, not how you get it done. So I'm using a 1.8, and I have my bond value to put 0.75, and indirect illumination is turned on, and I've specifically checked this ambient occlusion. Ambient occlusion does that dark corner shading that you get in your scene. You would see that, and I would let you call your attention to that, and I will turn that off and render and see what it looks like. And most times I use a 500, at times I use 1000, depending on how the scene is and what I want to achieve at the time. And right here I think I should be using an irradiance map, and I've done a setting of 700 with my light cache, my irradiance map, and done a couple of settings. You could just come up with various settings here, which is very nice, and you can just low, medium, and all that. I have done my own settings practically this way. And okay, on my light cache, I've done a 700 subdivisions. And one other thing you should always notice is try to make sure you know the number of threads you have in your system, which when we come here is what you see. If you call up your task manager, you see right now I'm recording with this system, which has a Core 2 quad, which has 4 threads running, and just like 4 processors running, but then it's running 4 cores. So, and by default you get an 8 here, which is not good for your render if you don't have 8 running cores actually. But if you have an i7, if I was on the i7 now, an i7 has the 8 cores. There are certain i7s with 8 cores, and there are ones with 12 cores, 12 running cores. So you can as well just set this to 8, or the number of cores you have. But for now I'm running on this, which uses 4 cores, and which is very essential. If you have a different number, it actually slows down your render, because it's trying to see if you have more than 4 cores. Okay, that is just the basic setting. And right here, and under the setting here from on the system, I always turn this up. Basically this is dependent on the amount of memory your system has. If you're running on a 16 gig memory, you can as well just turn this up to like say 6 gig memory limit, or more, at least reasonably. That wouldn't be too much for your 16 gig, which would be up to your 16 gig, say 8 gig or so. And what this actually does is, if you have a couple of things in your scene, it makes them load up fast. Else, if this is turned down, by default I think you get a 400. And if the scene is quite heavy and you have a lot of objects in the scene and a lot of proxies and all other stuff, it tries to load that on the memory. And if the memory is too low, Max will automatically try to adjust that, but which now takes up memory, which now takes up render time in trying to calculate that. But once you have a higher value, it loads up fast and you don't get errors. Basically you don't get too much errors compared to when it's quite low. So I always turn this to a 4 gig. Basically it's enough for me right here, and those are just the basic settings I adjust, and I am good to go. I click my render, and of course I have the V-Ray frame buffer on enabled, so I don't render into my max frame buffer. And the good thing about the V-Ray frame buffer, you can actually have a couple of settings to adjust, and one of the things is the new feature for that V-Ray, and you can actually load up different views of renders or different shades of render and compare with each other. Like I have a scene right here and I have another scene right here, and I can say, okay, I want to load this up in my A and I want to load this up in my B, and you can have that, say, okay, this is one view and this is, and you can have it 2 different settings for 2 different, you'd see that when we work 2 different settings for for the same shot, and compare them to each other, and that way, and a lot of things can go on and good, and you can actually compare renders. Okay, let's do our render here and see what our preview render looks like. And right now I'm probably going to pause the scene and come back when it's done. Okay, now we have 2 different renders, right? I rendered initial one with a unit value for the multiplier value for the V-Ray light at 1, and I got this render, and I rendered at a 10. I rendered at 1, and this is what I got. And you can see the good thing here, how useful this can get. The render history, the frame buffer render history, and you can actually compare two images and two different images, and you can view what you've rendered right here and see what it looks like. And equally, you know what this can be useful for. So right now I've done two different renders, and you can actually see the time and here, and you can see this one takes 1 minute 14 seconds and this takes 31 seconds. Actually it shouldn't take this long on this system actually, but I'm doing a couple of things in the background. I think well, the screen recording equally, then there are a couple of other things running in my background I'm working on, and it's making it take a bit of a time and slowing down my render here. Okay, good. Now we have I think we obviously don't want this, and we are good. We are still getting somewhere with this particular image. And a couple of things I want to call your attention to right here is, even though we have used just this single light right here, which is the V-Ray dome, you see we've gotten a couple of things, and you can see it gives us our environment, which is the sky, which is very lovely, and very lovely. And you can see that you can tell where the sun is practically coming from, which shows it's coming from here. And you can see as well that you get that shadow, like there is a sun cast causing a shadow right here, the shade right here. And you can see, then if you're now going to add your real sunlight, you can now tell, oh, this is where I want to add my sunlight from. And then you can say, oh, then I would have to adjust this guy right here to fit that direction of the sunlight, because this actually gives you a very good setup. Well, you can there are a couple of tricks I like to use when I'm working on this, because at times I don't even use a sunlight in my scene, and I can show you a couple of shots. Basically there are night shots which we are going to get to. Like this is just the V-Ray dome and no other light, and of course the post walk, and I did a couple of lighting in the scene, which we are going to show you how to do those tricks and to get the interior lighting. And these are other shots. Like this just has just a dome light, and a dome light which from the pool view you can actually tell like a sunset scene, which the evening shots is very cool with the lighting and the shadow, then the cast of the sun on the floor and all that. Then of course the regular lighting I did for the pool and the floor areas. Okay, now, and you can see how lovely that comes right here, which is this. Then of course we want this to be a little bit more bright because this is a sunny time, this is a sunny day, and we want a very good sun cast. And of course, so what we're going to do right here is I'm going to adjust a couple of settings on my camera. First, I don't like this funny red feel from the cloud, and what I actually use to adjust that, I say I want a neutral color balance, a white balance. I wanted to have a white balance. Then right here, the shutter speed is, though there are a couple of other settings we could do which actually try to simulate the exact setting in a real world camera, but right now, just to adjust a couple of settings here, I'm going to change this to 100. And changing this to 100, it means we're reducing the shutter speed, which allows more light into our camera, then makes the scene brighter. This is just like a real world camera, if you know anything, if you know anything about photography. But if you don't, it's not a problem. But just understand that the lesser the shutter speed, the more light comes in, then the brighter your scene comes. Then the film speed, one other thing I change, if I increase that, it makes the scene a lot brighter. Not that it's the same thing with this, it's not the same thing with this, but it makes it wash out a little more, then which gives it a little bit of brightening all through. So it's just like saying you're brightening out, working in Photoshop, and you're brightening out the image you're working on. And of course my good old floor, which gives a very nice good reflection right here, and which I always love, because on a sunny day you get that, on that slightly shiny floor, you get, depending on the floor type basically. I think I love that particular. Then you can see our glass which reflects as we want it, and we could tone the reflection down a little bit more, depends on how it is, depending on what we get from what we want. Okay, and right now I've changed this setting. Then one other thing I would do is I'll call up my environment and effects. I use the number 8 on my keyboard, and right here what I do is, because I'm going to be tuning up my light, making it brighter to light my scene exactly the way I want it, to light it up like a real day lighting, so I get the real, because this is quite dark, it's really actually dark. So I'm going to use two settings. I'm going to have two different settings. We can close this for the meantime. It's still there, it's saved in a frame buffer. You can always do it here and set a save location, then you set the size to which you want to allocate to it. So whenever I close this and call it back up, I still get these files right here inside here. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up my material editor, and I'm going to drag this sky which I dragged into my light equally into this environment map, which I'm also going to instance. So it's going to place it exactly. Now that I have this, I can make this guy invisible. I can filter that and select and get it back. Okay, and I can tell this to be invisible, because once I keep increasing the brightness of this, there comes a time where we have a burn in our environment. I'll show you that, then I'll tell you how it works. And right here, and on my material editor, I'm going to leave this as, say, 1, or I forgot we toned that down, so I think that should adjust whatever we have here. So this should be at 1, and we would get a good setting right here. I'll leave this at 1. Then if I don't get enough brightness, I don't touch this. What I do is I come here and I adjust the brightness here. So if this is invisible, which is actually showing this at the moment, if it's turned invisible is turned on, what you now get is to see is what is in your environment. If it is off, it is the map from this light that you get to see here. Let's do a couple of renders and I'll explain what happens at that. Okay, first thing what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this off, and I'm going to do a render with this still visible, then another render with it invisible. First we are done, we've done this fine with it invisible. Then I'm going to turn this on, and which says invisible. Then I'm going to render. Then you see what happens, that we don't see this background. We don't see this background. It just comes as a bare black background, which is this black background color. Okay, I'm going to do a render right now, and I'm going to pause the screen for a moment till it comes back, and I'll bring it back on. Okay, by now this is what we get, because we have made this invisible. Initially when it was visible, this is what we got. And of course this looks a little red, and that's because we had to change this setting from our V-Ray camera, and we adjusted a couple of settings right here, and so we have a bit of a difference in the, but then because we have turned off visibility for the particular, for this map we added here, we made it invisible. That makes us not have a background, and if it's turned on, we get to have a background like this. So what I want is, if I have to turn this up so high, because I have to get a very good well lit environment, it might burn out all these areas. I'll do a couple of renders to show all the differences. So I'll bring that up when that is done. Okay, right now I've come back with a couple of renders, and which I'm going to explain the settings to you right here. This setting is a render with alright, for this particular render, what I have is without this turned on, just to show you what this how these settings work when I have my dome light, and I have this to be invisible. With this setting, this is turned, the invisible is turned on. This is what you get, because it is with this on, with this off, is when it shows what we have as our map right here, and it shows that in the viewport as well. But so if you save that as a PNG, you see it, and you see it right there in the viewport. And right now it was turned off, as which checked on, which says invisible. Then we get this. Then when we now have it turned on, when we now have the environment turned, the map turned on, which is checked off here, which says visible, then we get this, and that's still without this turned on. And now that we have it this way, because we have our multiplier to be at 1.5, we have a little bit, I think we're getting burned right here. It's giving us quite too much light here, but though it lights our scene good enough as we want it, but it gives us too much burn right in the environment, in the background. So what I always do is I turn this off by checking this on, then I turn this on, which I've applied from here. I dragged and drop, and it's an instance, so this still remains 1, and so it comes up as good as I want it right here. And if you can see, it's not too burned, it's not too burnt out. So let's do a compare. We set this as A and we set this as B, and we can do a comparison. We still have the same feel on our building. That's because it's still the same thing that lights it. The environment doesn't light it, it only creates an environment. It's just called environment man. It only creates an environment. So we have it good, well lit as at 1.5, but now invisible. But now we now turn this to be the visible one, which now gives us not too burnt out background environment. So this is what I use most times. So if I think I'm not satisfied with the light here, I can always turn this up without it affecting what I have in my background, which still remains the one that we have in this area. So I leave this as my 1 and leave this as default, and of course I leave this gamma as 1, and now adjust my brightness right here with this turned off by checking this invisible on. So that's how good it is to work with this. I'm going to cut this video right here to not make it too long, and we're going to have a part 2. In the part 2, I'm going to show you how to work furthermore with it and adjust this. Then when we add our light, our sunlight, to give our very hard shadows. Of course this can give some shadows, but not really hard shadows. Then we can adjust this, the direction from which the sun given in this HDRI map, how we adjust it to our original location. I hope this is useful, and you stay tuned to the part 2 of this particular lighting up tutorial here, and we'll be back soon. Thank you.